Welcome to First and Future Live, a program from the Institute for Emerging Issues at NC State University. I'm Leslie Boney, the director of the Institute for Emerging Issues, and this is a program about the people and places that are shaping our state's future. Every other week, we're going to look at key issues facing the state, and we'll be talking with the people who are figuring them out. Last week, we looked at a couple of different reports on racial equity and criminal justice, one published by a group of Democrats and another by a group of Republicans. And we looked for the points of intersection between those two reports. In the future, we're going to be looking at a bunch of different issues, including the big issue of recovery from learning loss, the fate of small businesses going forward in the economy, the pandemic, and others. But for the next 4 shows, we're going to be focusing on a group of universities that is playing a critical role in figuring out the future of higher education in our state. We're going to be focusing on the state's historically Black colleges and universities, what some people call HBCUs. And you can see a picture of them on the screen. Starting in southeastern North Carolina, you'll see Fayetteville State University. Then in the Triangle area, you'll see Shaw, St. Augustine's, and in Durham, North Carolina Central University. In Greensboro, A&T University, we'll be talking about them in just a second, and Bennett College. In Winston-Salem State. Then you head down I-85 towards Salisbury, you see Livingstone College, and then in Charlotte, Johnson C. Smith University. These are 10 universities that together graduate more African Americans than any other state HBCUs in the country. And HBCUs are down from a high of about 400 many years ago to about 100 now. So these 10 remaining universities in North Carolina are playing a critical role in our future. We're going to be focusing on them and hearing more about how they were founded, how they developed, their impact on the state. We're going to talk about how they're doing during this time of struggle in higher education. Then we're going to look to the future and ask their leaders where we go from here. You are a really important part of these shows. Some of you are watching this show live on YouTube or Facebook Live. Others of you are watching a videotaped version of the program. Some of you are listening to an audio-only version. We thank all of you for joining us. Regardless of how you're watching, we want you to let us know how we're doing and what you think about the show. If you're watching live, though, please send in your questions for our guest. During the second half of the program, we're going to get to as many questions as possible for those guests. So it's your chance to ask the questions you've been waiting to ask. Let's get started. Today, we're going to be taking a close look at the largest historically Black college and university in the state and honestly in the country, North Carolina A&T State University, most often called just A&T. We're joined by their Chancellor, Dr. Harold Martin. Dr. Martin, thank you for being with us.
I'm delighted to be with you today and excited about our conversation.
Good. Well, let me start with, I guess, where any conversation about higher ed starts these days with the pandemic. This fall, a lot of schools tried to open and then just immediately shut down and went solely to online. And A&T really attracted national attention for not doing that, for managing to stay open. Can you talk a little bit about how that happened and what you think made A&T maybe a little bit better at adjusting to this pandemic than some other universities?
Thanks very much. And I think part of the conversation for us, as with many institutions, not only throughout North Carolina, but across the nation as well, we planned very extensively, very significant contingency plans, asked lots of questions, the what ifs, if you will. But we also put in place very rigid sets of protocols that we communicated very extensively with our students and with parents of our students as we engaged them in preparation for their enrollment in the fall of 2020. But we also put in place very extensive testing and requirements for testing during the fall semester. And we were very clear about students who stepped outside those expectations for engagement with our university. And we sent them home when students were inconsistent with those expectations. But we also believe that our students, unlike many students in America, are low-income, first-generation students in high percentages who had a greater sense of need to be back in Greensboro, to be connected with our university. And they valued those relationships and connections with their faculty and our staff, quite honestly. And they wanted to be in Greensboro, engaged with the university. And so to a high degree, many of our students did not want to do anything that compromised their ability to remain in school, connected with their support system, their friends, and the support of our faculty and our staff. We believe that played a big part in helping our students live within the expectations that we framed for them. And of course, the significant levels of engaged services that we had to move in many, many ways from just face-to-face to also face-to-face and virtual engagement as well. High levels of intensity of engagement. So we believe that played a big part in supporting our students remaining in compliance, in our ability to continue to keep our university open with face-to-face instruction, engagement with students on our campus and the like.
Am I right that you still have no cases of students being hospitalized?
We have no cases of students being hospitalized. Of course, we've had students who have contracted the virus. We do a high level of testing on our campus. We have great partners who engage with us, Cone Health, Gifford County Health Department, for example, who have helped us stand up regular and rigorous testing on a weekly basis. When we find that we have an increasing trend in a particular area or a residence hall, or potentially a cluster, we will deploy a more intensive testing in that residence hall until we manage the restrictions and see the trends downward again. We've been very, very fortunate, I must say, quite honestly, and our student leaders have been great partners in helping us continue to maintain a quality message with our students. To date, no students hospitalized, and we are continuing to focus on the high level of testing, but we've also stood up the first among the UNC system campuses, a vaccine clinic on our campus that has engaged not only our faculty and our staff, but a high percentage of individuals in our community to help bring the vaccine into East Greensboro. The high percentage of African Americans live in East Greensboro because we know what the concerns are, and we believe it's our responsibility to help educate, test, as well as to deliver the vaccine as well. In the true sense of what universities like ours as a land-grant institution do, and to take that very seriously.
That's really an impressive record. Congratulations on the success so far. I want to go back to that land grant institution that you mentioned, because A&T was part of a second wave of land grants in the United States, the so-called 1890s universities. They were part of the Second Morrill Act. And by the way, congratulations on your 130th anniversary, just celebrated. You're originally founded for agriculture and mechanic arts around the same time as NC State. Why was that second? Can you talk about that second wave and why they were so important to the United States and what the focus of those universities was?
When Senator Justin Morrill of Vermont advanced legislation to create the first set of land-grant institutions, really the first formal structure of higher education in America for ordinary citizens, not private institutions that primarily focused on the elite of our nation at that time. But the first Morrill Act created land-grant institutions to bring education in degree areas that were critically important to our nation as an evolving nation at that time: agriculture, education, business, and the mechanical arts, but also not at the exclusion of the classical arts. And so that first Morrill Act was passed in 1862. During 1862, of course, this was just during the early stages of the Civil War. African Americans did not have rights in America at that time. And so the first Morrill Act focused primarily on providing educational opportunities for white citizens of our nation. Following the Civil War and the first set of land-grant institutions were getting established, they were being established at the exclusion of Black Americans. And following the Civil War, there were high numbers of freed Blacks who did not have access to a fundamental education to improve their standing in life as well. So Justin Morrill, still a senator from Vermont, advanced the second Morrill Act of 1890. That legislation passed in August of 1890, specifically focused on creating higher educational opportunities for freed Blacks in the South predominantly, which is where most Blacks at that time were clustered. And on March 9th of 1891, North Carolina's General Assembly passed legislation to create North Carolina's land-grant institution of 1890, based on the Second Morrill Act, which created North Carolina A&T, the Agricultural Mechanical College for the Colored Race, as it was called at that time. There was no land or provision, no buildings to establish the institution. So in the very first year of operation, we were created through an established board of trustees in the basement of a building at Shaw University in Raleigh. And shortly thereafter, with the assistance of business leaders in Greensboro, North Carolina A&T, as we know it today, moved to Greensboro, North Carolina. So these institutions were critically important to creating formal educational opportunities, public universities in particular, throughout the South to support educational opportunities for free Blacks.
So you've grown steadily since then, changed the name at some point to Agriculture and Technical, and eventually became NC-A&T State in 1967, and throughout that time, steadily growing reputation. Maybe the first time that the full country really heard about A&T was in 1960 with a group called the A&T Four, a group of young men who sat down at a lunch counter in Greensboro. Can you talk a little bit about the A&T Four and what they meant to the university and to the state and country?
Absolutely. Obviously, during the creation of the land-grant university system, 1890 land-grant institutions created an educational opportunity, and they were evolving a select few private institutions in that window as well. You mentioned some of them in the opening comments this morning. But Jim Crow, segregation, et cetera, existed significantly throughout the formative years of A&T and other universities in North Carolina around the South as well. And that formed a group of intense levels of educational focus on preparing students and graduates who were highly engaged in the focus on civil rights. Numbers of graduates out of our university were constantly engaging with legislators and political leaders and congressional leaders, helping to advance opportunities for Blacks in America. During the window of the 60s, 4 A&T freshmen in the late 50s and early 60s, in that 1960 window, these 4 freshmen would come to North Carolina to pursue an education in North Carolina A&T, realized that there were just fundamental basic rights that did not exist for Blacks at the time, and lunch counters in 5 and dime stores such as Woolworths, S&H Cresses, for example. Some of us may remember those. You could not go in and get a cup of coffee or a hot dog or any kind of meal. These 4 A&T freshmen made a decision that they were going to change that trend in America. And so they planned well, with the support of some faculty and other community leaders, arrived one day on February 1st, 1960, and sat down at the Woolworth counter in downtown Greensboro and asked for service. And they did so in a nonviolent way. While they began this sit-in scenario as the very first framework for sit-ins in America, other students joined them, not only from A&T, but from Bennett College, Greensboro College, UNC Greensboro, Guilford College. And pretty soon, the high percentage of students and other citizens helped to join in that sit-in movement in Greensboro. And that sparked a trend in sit-ins across the nation as a whole. So these A&T 4 freshmen changed the course of America with that action on February 1st, 1960.
This week that we're talking is the beginning of the Derek Chauvin trial for the killing of George Floyd, and wondering what the mood on campus has been as this trial comes about, and how this year has been. I know there's still a pretty active group of people on campus that are deeply committed to and concerned about social justice issues.
You know, it's interesting. I'll tie this back to the A&T 4 and the evidence of alums of our university leaving our university and going out into society and continue to be leaders in activism and social change, which has created a historical trend, and bright and talented students from around the nation wanted to continue their education in the college level at North Carolina A&T. That's been a trend, a tradition, and we've taken that very seriously through the levels of engagement in education, understanding civics and history of our nation and the like. And so even during the unfortunate murder of George Floyd on that day in May in Minneapolis, Minnesota, by Chauvin as a Minneapolis police officer and the other police officers, we engaged our students during that window shortly after that unfortunate incident, and helped our students understand you have a voice, use your voice. If you want to protest, understand why you're protesting, be engaged in outcome solutions and not part of the problem. So our student leaders took to conversation, engaging our students. Many of our students, not only in Greensboro, but around the nation from whence they live and they've come, continue to be part of that protest following the murder of George Floyd, but also Breonna Taylor, Aubrey, if you will, as well as part of that conversation around police brutality and the like. And so our students still are engaged in civic engagement, social justice reform. We also engaged our faculty and our staff in understanding the role we play in helping to change the nation, change our communities as well. And one of the conversations we continue to have with our faculty and our staff is what role do we play and continue to address those areas in America where it's more than just about policing, Leslie, it's also about inequities, disparities in wealth, disparities in education, disparities in health, joblessness, and homelessness that have a greater propensity to impact minority people, African Americans, and Latinx folks throughout America as well. So have conversations in that space, be engaged, make a difference. And our university takes that very seriously. Our faculty and our staff are actively engaged in strategies to combat disparities, to combat social injustice, for example. It's a level of conversation we think is critically important, and we're about the solutions, in addition to educating our students, preparing them for the world of work, the research we're engaged in, societal policies and social policies and the like. And so incredible opportunities for the role our university has played and continues to play today.
It's interesting as I look at alums of A&T, I see folks like Jesse Jackson and Jesse Jackson Jr., who on some level kind of stood outside and pushed for change there. And there are others that like Michael Regan, the new EPA administrator, and Dr. Lynn Perry Wooten, who's president of a university. I think Ron McNair, the astronaut. You know, these are folks who really worked within to make change. So you see that kind of people working on both ends of the problem.
We do. Fortunately, we have a diversity of excellent academic programs at the undergraduate and graduate levels that are attracting outstanding students to our university in record numbers, which continues to propel growth for our university and across all levels, allowing us to continue to produce outstanding graduates across bachelor's, master's, and doctoral levels, leading the nation in producing outstanding graduates in careers STEM, business, agriculture, journalism, areas that are critically important to our nation as a whole. We have a wealth of graduates in all major sectors of business and industry and government who are excelling in their career choices, but not only are they making a difference within the organizations where they work, but they're also making a difference in the communities where they live. But business leaders, entrepreneurs who are helping to be advocates for improving the quality of life and the competitiveness and social equity throughout America. We engage with these alums on a regular basis. As a matter of fact, their enthusiastic support of North Carolina A&T State University reflects itself in so many ways, not only in their giving, but their advocacy for our university and their involvement. You spoke of Michael Regan as one of our newest alums in the Biden administration. Of course, Congresswoman Alma Adams continues to be a major shaker in Congress for our university, for example. Business leaders who are doing exceedingly well. Alums such as Henry Fry have made history in North Carolina, for example. Paul Jones, a member of our Board of Trustees, pointed to the judicial system in North Carolina. Our alums are making a difference across the nation as a whole, and certainly right here in North Carolina. We believe that's critically important as we graduate increasingly larger numbers of graduates who make a difference in their professions. They're being successful in their own right, but they're also making a difference in the communities in which they live as well. And that we frame as part of the expectations, as part of the educational experience and the excitement of why it's important to be, to consider our university among those top choices that students have. And we're getting our share of those students who come to our university. And we provide them the educational preparation they need, quite honestly, to continue to be successful, which we're very excited about.
Yeah, let me just show people some basic facts about A&T, and we can get to them throughout the program. But I just wanted to show a slide that kind of summarizes where you are. As I mentioned, you are the largest HBCU by a pretty good margin and have been for some time now. Latest numbers about between 12 and 13,000 students last year. Average GPA of 3.62. Large percentage of folks from out of state that are coming in, ranked as the #1 public HBCU in the country, #7 overall among all HBCUs, #1 source of African American engineers, STEM graduates, and ag scientists. Top 50 in social mobility, taking people from where they start to where they end up, about $60 million in grants. So obviously a lot of data there, but clearly A&T is looked at nationally as a leader among HBCUs. And you, being the longest standing chancellor in the system, but also one of the longest tenured chancellors among HBCUs nationally, must feel some level of pressure at this point to be able to explain the case for HBCUs as we go forward. Historically, as you mentioned at the top, the idea was the HBCUs had to exist because no one was admitting African Americans among the historically white institutions. What's the case for HBCUs now?
It's a great question, Leslie. And I think some of it's embedded in some of your last comments. While we are an HBCU, our history and our founding and our historical role as an institution of higher education, we don't see ourselves competing in the HBCU framework. We see ourselves having to establish the relevancy and competitiveness of our university, competing with all universities. We are a doctoral research land-grant institution. We framed a group of peers that are consistent with the Board of Governors selection in partnership with our university. Those institutions that we are compared against, those are comparable universities in America who are doctoral research land-grant institutions similar to North Carolina A&T. They include Montana State, they include New Mexico State, they include Portland State, they include Old Dominion University, predominantly white institutions in America, where we must continue to compete and demonstrate the relevancy of our university in attracting top students, doing and engaging in relevant research, and producing graduates who leave our university well prepared. And what we have demonstrated within the strategic direction of our university, that we are amongst the top 10% of our peers within that framework around enrollment growth, quality of students arriving at our university, success of our students through retention and graduation rates, graduation of our graduates, getting jobs. We're only second to NC State in starting salaries, for example, of our graduates leaving our university in the UNC system. We're amongst the top public universities in America, HBCU notwithstanding. And I think what we are continuing to demonstrate is the competitiveness of our university against all universities in America who are comparable to our university in mission and Carnegie class. And that, in our minds, is critically important to distinguish our university as a branded university ranked through U.S. News and World Report as a very competitive institution. We have to continue to answer that question on a regular basis. Is there pressure? Well, there's pressure in seeking to be the best in class. And that's what we seek to be, best in class with our university. That takes strategic investments in resources, infrastructure, recruiting and retaining top talent, creating new academic programs that are relevant to the growing needs of our state and our nation as a whole. And we're doing that exceedingly well. And so we think critically important that pressure is what excites us because we really want to be best in class.
As you're best in class among peer institutions, some of which are HBCUs and some of which aren't, you're also best in class, and I just mentioned this briefly in the slide, in graduating African-American STEM graduates, in graduating African-American engineers, and graduating African-American ag scientists. And there are a lot of places that are admitting African-Americans now, but there's something about that A&T is doing that is resulting in greater success. And I've been talking over the past couple of weeks to one of your faculty members, a guy named Corey Red, who's really interested in seeing if we can increase the total number of African-American people with graduate degrees across the country, and thinking that A&T has figured something out. And I'm wondering whether it's something special about being an HBCU or whether there's a secret sauce you have at A&T in particular.
Well, I think there is this culture of high levels of engagement and expectations of our students. I'm a graduate of our university. I'm one of those STEM graduates from years ago, if you will. I found faculty members then, as I've continued to intentionally recruit talented faculty today, who have high expectations of our students. When those students arrive on our campus, they see lots of other students who are what I refer to as nerdy, geeky students who love math and science like they do. They aren't judged by the color of their skin. They are judged by the content of their character and the content of their minds, their desire to excel. And when those students step on our campus, they get that level of engagement. They're inspired by seeing so many others who have historically come to our university and excelled, and they then see themselves enabled and inspired to step up and compete in a significant way as well. That makes a difference in the aspirational levels of our students. We say to our students and their parents, your aspirations are our aspirations, and we treat them with a high level of demand and expectations. And not only that, when you create that kind of competitive environment, students inspire other students to compete and succeed as well. So it's not just the role of the faculty, engagement, and staff support, but also other high achieving upperclassmen who inspire these younger students who arrive on our campus as well. Now we mix that with a variety of experiences, opportunities to intern with global industries and government agencies and state agencies that complement their educational experiences. We also provide for them the growing opportunities to be engaged in undergraduate research and other levels of experiences. And we focus on those intangible skills as well, speaking skills and writing skills, those soft skills that we know are critically important for their success as well. And then you complement that with that what we characterize as that Aggie spirit. It's an exciting educational opportunity and experience, quite honestly, that makes a difference on our campus. And so from our board to our leadership team, to our alums and our faculty and staff, there are a variety of individuals who engage with our campus, who then engage with these students and preparing them for their life's work.
Thank you, Chancellor Martin. There are a lot of questions coming in over our comments, and we'll get to those in just a second. I just wanted to show one other pair of slides that get at some of what you were talking about and some of the challenge that A&T is meeting. But coming into universities, when you look at post-secondary enrollment, you see that African Americans are enrolling in North Carolina at a lower rate than some other demographic groups. Both African Americans and Latino or Hispanic students enroll at lower rates. And if you look at completion down the road, you also see graduation rates that are lower among African Americans. The state, My Future NC has a goal of 80%, and African Americans still lag in that category. And you've talked about some of the things that A&T does specifically. Can you maybe talk about things that HBCUs in general might be able to do to help increase those both enrollment and graduation rates?
I think the HBCUs in general, and certainly it's an area of focus for our institution, connections with K-12, critically important. We have to continue to do more, as we have done in the past, producing more and better teachers who are critically important to enhancing presence and diversity of teachers in K-12. We know the research shows that students perform better when they are engaged by a high percentage of teachers who look like them, who motivate and inspire them. And so one of the critical areas that we spend a significant amount of investment and focus on is increasing enrollment in teacher education, especially in STEM areas, math teachers and science teachers, for example. So we've got to do more of that. We also have to need to connect more through our faculty and our students with local school districts to provide mentoring and support to children in K-12 and their parents, in helping to educate parents on a critical role they play and help to enhance the support they provide to their children and motivating them to do well in school and help them to prepare them better for not only graduation from high school, but readiness for college as well. But the other thing you're seeing HBCUs do more of is creating high schools and middle schools on their college campuses. As we've done on our college campus in partnership with Guilford County School System, we've created 2 high schools on our campus with the intent of enhancing, in one instance, through a middle college called the North Carolina A&T Middle College, the success of African American males and minority male students who may not do well and be as successful in a larger high school setting. But on our campus in the middle college, these young men are engaged by highly professional teachers who inspire them, and these young men are graduating from this middle college at 100%. They come in as ninth graders and they graduate in significant numbers, and a high percentage of them going to college. But we also have a STEM early college that focuses on those students who have a strong interest in math and science and careers beyond the math and science, beyond high school to study in STEM. And so we have a great partnership with Gifford County Schools in what we call the STEM, North Carolina A&T STEM Early College. Now, more and more HBCUs are creating these kinds of partnerships and collaborations to help accelerate, encourage, and enhance preparation through K-12, African-American children and other minority kids, to improve their success rate in high school in readiness for college, and are doing a better job of attracting a larger percentage of those students into historically Black colleges today to ensure their successes through strong mentoring programs, support services, and the like. We must continue to ensure increased success in K-12, readiness for college, and then encouraging students to go on to college beyond high school as well. Now, that also requires ensuring continuing education of parents around the role that they play and financial support in helping students go to college as well, because many of these students need financial assistance to go to college as well.
Thank you. As I mentioned, there are a lot of questions coming in, and we'll just start asking some of those as they come in. They'll be all over the place, and
Okay.
fortunately, you've been there a long time, so I'm guessing you've thought about most of these before. First, can you? There's a question about what A&T can do and has done to improve interactions with police in Greensboro. So, what role are you playing there in either helping to educate the Greensboro Police Department or work with students and people in your community about those interactions?
Great question. I, along with several members of my leadership team, our police chief, and student affairs administrators on our campus, meet often with the Greensboro Police Department. The police chief, Chief James, happens to be a graduate of North Carolina A&T, very recently appointed to his role. And even before Chief James, we met regularly to speak to and understand and share the perspectives of our students and the perspective of our community around policing in Greensboro and policing in East Greensboro in particular, where high percentage of the minority side of town, if you will, and understanding those challenges. We also meet with the city manager, the mayor, and the city council on a regular basis about not only policing, but economic development and investments in East Greensboro. We believe there's a connection, obviously, in creating jobs and opportunities in retail and educational opportunities in healthcare as well in East Greensboro that aligns with improving policing and giving feedback on police policies. And there's been a shift since the unfortunate murder of George Floyd, as an example, with changes in policy in Greensboro. Reasons for stopping a vehicle, for example, ways of engaging with individuals in the community when the police officer stops an individual either driving or walking in a community, for example. Those policies are influenced by the engagements we bring to the table through the social sciences of our faculty, our students involved at the table in conversations with community leaders as well. We think that's critically important to bring that value of advocacy and social engagement to help create better policy. we think is critically important, not just in policing, but across a host of other areas of engagement as well. And we're beginning to see that change occur. And of course, we are having those same kinds of discussions with our own university police department as well, with our students and our student leaders to help ensure that we're shaping policy for our university and engagement for our university police department, who are in a very significant partnership with the Greensboro Police Department as well.
Thank you. There's a question about the enrollment numbers I mentioned earlier, and that's the percentage in the 20s of people who are out of state. And system-wide in the UNC system, there's an 18% cap on out of state students. But A&T has always historically had a special exception because of its unique role in, I think, particularly in engineering. Can you just talk a little bit about that? We had a question about how A&T is able to float above that cap.
Yes, the percentage of African American students graduating from high school in North Carolina who are prepared to go to college and be successful in college is a very coveted population of students. All students are, but every university in North Carolina, public and private, is vying for that population of minority students graduating from high schools in North Carolina, from Chapel Hill to Duke to East Carolina, UNC Charlotte, UNC Greensboro, North Carolina A&T, North Carolina Central, Fayetteville State. All public and private universities are vying for that relatively fixed population of students. So are we, and we want our fair share of those students, in addition to focusing on recruiting a diverse student population to our university as well. Given that that population of students is fairly limited, if we as a university want to continue to drive a reasonable level of enrollment growth of 1% to 3%, which is what we focus on with our board, and we want students who have the capacity to arrive at our university and have the ability, with the support of our university, to navigate the rigors of our competitive academic programs and drive the outcomes we are desirous of: retention, graduation rates, preparation for the market, to navigating these rigorous academic programs. We need to have access to a larger pool of students other than just the North Carolina pool of students, because our traditional population of students, about 72, 73% of our students are African American today. We petitioned the Board of Governors to broaden that pool of students, to give us a higher percentage of out-of-state students that allows us to, again, admit students who have the ability to be successful on our campus, in our academic programs, and still positioned to grow our enrollment at a modest level of 1% to 3%. The Board of Governors recognize our desire to have these outcomes that are critically important for our university, and granted our university a higher cap of 25%. So we seek to stay within that 25 to 26% cap for our university, attract a competitive population of students, and grow our enrollment, produce a competitive number of graduates that are critical to North Carolina's economy and that are heavily recruited in general from our university. That has substantially enhanced opportunities for growth, opportunities for brand and recognition. National rankings of our university are critically important to the focus of our institution, hence now and well into the future, quite honestly. So we're pleased that the Board of Governors have been supportive, and the results are reflected in growth and graduate production for our university.
Talked about the competition that you're facing right now. I think every university right now is really frightened about next year and what they're going to see. But I understand you've been seeing increased applications in this sort of tense environment that universities are facing. Shannon Robinson asked the question, what is A&T's plan to maintain affordability and enrollment while facing increasing tuition and fee costs for prospective and returning students? So how do you maintain that affordability and enrollment numbers at a time when a lot of families are challenged?
Great question. Because of the strategies we've employed over the last decade, building on our history as a university and competitiveness, our admission of students for fall 2021 is up 43% over last year. So there is a huge demand for access to our university, both in-state and out-of-state students, for admission and enrollment on our campus. Now, that's a big part of what we've been seeking to create as part of enhancing brand recognition and success of our university. The Board of Governors has been very clear about the maintenance of the expectation of tuition rates for our university system being as low as practicable. You're familiar with that phrase, I'm sure. And as part of the commitment of the board to ensure that we are maintaining access and affordability for all UNC campuses, all UNC universities are required to maintain tuition rates at the lowest quartile of their Board of Governors approved peers. So every year, the board sets the level at which tuition may possibly be increased, and any rate of increase must keep your tuition rate within the lowest quartile of your peers. That helps us stay within that expectation constitutionally that we will maintain tuition rates as low as practicable. Now, as many would know, the university system has not raised tuition rates for the last several years, including tuition rates for fall 2021, 21-22 now, for in-state students. The out-of-state student tuition rate is still maintained at a competitive level, but at market rates to allow us to ensure that that out-of-state student pays the full cost to attend our universities, while in-state students, the legislature helps to underwrite the cost to attend for in-state students, taxpaying citizens for our state. So that helps us maintain the competitive tuition rates for in-state students to attend North Carolina A&T and other UNC campuses, of which we're very proud of.
Another topic that a lot of universities are looking at right now is the disappearance of males, the disappearance of male students. I know you were my boss maybe 12 years ago, and at the time, A&T still had a majority male population, and now nationally, the rate of college going by women is about 60% of the population, 40% of males. That's true at A&T as well. And what a lot of men are saying, and it's been more pronounced this year as more men say, I'm not going to college after high school. And what a lot of them are saying is there is a cost barrier that we're facing, but it's particularly pronounced among African American males. And I'm wondering what your approach to that is. So you've talked about keeping up enrollment, but is there anything in particular that you can do that will help convince more men to attend?
Absolutely. We have a number of initiatives. I'll try to touch on a few of them in the time we have. But clearly, we believe it's critically important that, again, in those partnerships we have with regional high schools and K-12 school districts, is to deploy a number of our students on our campus to work with elementary and middle schools and high schools through mentoring programs and tutorial programs of our students. We deploy members of our fraternities. We deploy members of our athletics programs to go into elementary and middle schools and high schools to read to children, to serve as tutors, and host programs that engage young students in general, and in particular, African American male students in particular. We also create a greater focus on pre-college programs where we bring to our university throughout the school year and on weekends and through summer camps, math and science camps, and as athletics camps as well, to engage with African American boys, to keep them engaged and focused on the importance of doing well in school and their preparation to go to college upon graduation as well. Once we recruit in an aggressive way young male students coming to our university, we also create programs on our campus to engage much more intensely with young men, but not at the exclusion of young women on our campus as well, to ensure that there are mentors, there are tutorial support programs, there are support lectures and engagement with speakers who come to our university who are focused on helping to bring examples of why it's important for young men to do well on our campus. We also are bringing a higher level of financial support to our students in general. We have a high percentage of first-generation students still who attend our university, as they do in the UNC system in general, but these students come with financial needs. And what we seek to do by federal financial aid through Pell Grants are appropriate, and we are continually advocating for increasing of those dollars. We've had to add in, very intentionally additional grant aid from our university to support our financial aid programs, to reduce loan requirements, as well as to reduce needs for our students to work. We've just completed a major capital campaign that doubled the amount of money we thought we would be able to raise. Our alums stepped up in substantial ways in giving in percentages and amounts. And of course, we're all familiar with the very generous gift to our university by Mackenzie Scott that supports our university. We're deploying a significant number of those dollars towards scholarships and grant aid to assist our students in attending our university, to help reduce the level of cost to the families, but also the debt these students will graduate when they leave our university as well. So we are very intentional about support programs, K-12, producing more African-American teachers, especially male teachers, engaging with recruitment, and supporting these young students on our campus when they arrive, both financially and through support programs.
You mentioned the gift from Mackenzie Scott. This was one of a series of gifts that came out last year that seemed to come out of nowhere. And in reality, I think she'd been doing, and her team had been doing careful research on universities across the country, but $45 million arrived with no strings attached. And it was just do what you think is most appropriate with this funding. And that's part of a larger endowment campaign that A&T has been doing. What's the overall role that that's going to play in shoring up the university's future?
First, we're very thankful to Ms. Scott for her generosity to our university, along with all of the corporate partners who've also contributed very substantially to the university's capital campaign, and our alums and friends of our university. Our endowment has grown quite dramatically over the past 10 years, and we think it's critically important to continue to build the endowment that produces resources through well-managed endowment oversight by our Board of Trustees to ensure that we are creating a funding source in a diverse way, in addition to state appropriations, that we invest very strategically on our campus to support students, support our faculty, support our academic programs, support athletics and the role that athletics plays in continuing to build visibility and support and recognition for our university and excitement for our alums in their giving to the university as well. We've been very intentional with Ms. Scott's gift in adding a portion of that gift to our endowment to ensure that the programs we begin with some of these resources will sustain themselves well into the future. We're particularly focused, Ms. Scott's gift, on 3 colleges of our university where we believe there are tremendous areas of opportunity to recruit top students, create centers of excellence, enhance graduate programs and research. And they include the arts and the humanities. We have great theater and art and music programs on our campus. We want to give much more visibility to those academic programs at the undergraduate and graduate levels. We're supporting strategic investments in our College of Education to enhance enrollment and increase productivity, to produce more teachers, especially in STEM areas, but across a broad array of areas, create increased research in education, impact in K-12, and policy and the like. And we are investing strategically in our College of Health Sciences to produce more healthcare providers, especially more African-American healthcare providers, diverse healthcare providers, because of the great need for more nurses and allied health graduates in that space as well, so that we are rising into a level of support. Similarly in STEM, we will see our university's impact in health, in education, in the arts as well. And so we are targeting a great portion of those funds to raise our level of enrollment, degree productivity, research, and impact and policy in those core areas as well. We're excited about what the return will be on those investments.
Chancellor Martin, we're running out of time. Can you just look ahead maybe for 30 seconds and tell us where A&T is going to be in 5 years?
We expect enrollment will continue to grow. We're focusing on moving our enrollment from about 12,800 to about 14,000 students at the bachelor's, master's, and PhD levels. We expect to continue to produce graduates north of 2,500 per year. We're at about 2,400 today. We expect to continue to see research grow on our campus and the research innovation emerging from our university that allows us to continue to position to be a major economic driver for the Piedmont Triad region and the state as a whole. And we expect to continue to build the brand recognition and impact of our university in substantial ways as a top-tier doctoral research land-grant university in our state and the nation as a whole. We're well on our way to realizing those expectations. We're excited about our future and very pleased about the significant level of support our board, the president, the board of governors, the legislature, and the governor see as an evolving role of significance for North Carolina A&T State University.
Dr. Harold Martin, thank you for being with us. Dr. Harold Martin is the Chancellor of North Carolina A&T State University, part of the University of North Carolina system in North Carolina, and the largest HBCU in the country. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Leslie.
That's our show for today. First and Future is produced by James Herrick. Leadership on this series and the concept behind it comes from Greg Hedgepeth, our communications director, and promotional help from Kirsten Chang. Research this week from NC State student Zoe Walker, and help with slides and booking of some of our guests from Renee Potts. We're grateful to all of them. We ask that you join us again in 2 weeks when we're going to be doing the second part of our series, this one focusing on private HBCUs. Our guests are going to be Dr. Paulette Dillard, the president of Shaw University, and Dr. Suzanne Walsh, the president of Bennett College. Again, that is April 13th from 9 to 10. For all of us at NC State, thanks for joining us today. I'm Leslie Boney. We'll see you in the future.